Hello, and welcome to Stories by Peter Hubb. The California sun was a merciless white orb in the sky, beating down on the dusty hills of Sonoma County. The air smelled of dry earth and dormant dreams. Leo pulled his rental car to a stop in front of the old family estate, a place he hadn't seen in over a decade. The house, once a beacon of his childhood, now looked like a ghost. Its paint was peeling, the porch was rotting, and the once pristine rows of grapevines were a tangled, overgrown mess. He sighed, a long, weary exhalation that carried the weight of 1,000 unanswered calls and unsaid words. He had come back for one reason only: the will. His parents, pillars of the community and owners of the once revered Gilded Vine winery, had passed away in a quiet car accident, leaving their entire estate to their 3 children, him, Isabel, and Noah. As if on cue, a dusty SUV pulled up behind him. His sister, Isabel, stepped out, her designer clothes and polished shoes, a stark contrast to the rustic scenery. A famous sommelier in New York, she looked more at home in a high-end restaurant than on a crumbling vineyard. Her face, a mask of professional poise, betrayed a hint of emotion as her eyes took in the state of their childhood home. "Well," she said, her voice a low whisper, "it's worse than I remember." "It's a money pit," Leo said, his voice clipped and dry, "and the sooner we sell it, the better." Isabel turned to him, her eyes flashing with a familiar anger. "Sell it? Leo, this is our legacy. This is where we grew up. We can restore it. We can bring it back to its former glory." Before the argument could escalate, a third car arrived. Noah, the youngest, stepped out, a backpack slung over his shoulder. He was an artist, a dreamer, and the only one who still held a romanticized view of their family's past. "Hey guys," he said, a forced cheerfulness in his voice. "It's good to be home." The 3 of them walked up to the house in a silent, awkward procession. The front door was unlocked, and the interior was just as bad as the exterior. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that cut through the dirty windows. The furniture was covered in sheets, the air thick with the smell of old memories. They made their way to the living room, where a lawyer, a grim-faced woman in a sharp suit, was waiting for them.
She laid out the will on the dusty coffee table. It was a simple document, but its words would change their lives forever. The will stated that the vineyard, the house, and all the assets were to be inherited by the 3 siblings, but with one condition: they had to work together to restore the vineyard and produce a successful harvest within 3 years. If they failed, the entire estate would be donated to a local charity. Leo scoffed. "This is insane. We're a lawyer, a sommelier, and a starving artist. We have no idea how to run a vineyard." "Our parents were painters of dreams," Isabel said, her voice filled with a sudden, passionate conviction. "They believed in us. We can do this." "It's a beautiful thought," Leo said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But the reality is, this is a business, and it's a failing one. We should cut our losses and run." The argument that followed was a familiar one. It was a battle of wills, a clash of their very different personalities. Leo, the pragmatist, saw only the numbers. Isabel, the romantic, saw only the potential. Noah, the mediator, was caught in the middle, trying to find a way to make everyone happy. Later that day, after the lawyer had left, Isabel went to her mother's old study. It was a small, quiet room, filled with books and old photographs. She opened a small locked cabinet and found a box. Inside, nestled among old photographs and love letters, was a small, leather-bound journal. Her mother's journal. She opened it, her hands trembling. The first entry was from 30 years ago, written in a shaky, hesitant hand. "I can't believe what we did. The guilt is a heavy stone in my heart. He was our friend. He was our partner. And we betrayed him. I don't know if I can live with this."
Isabel's heart sank. She recognized the handwriting. It was her mother's. But the words, they were a betrayal of everything she had ever believed in. Her parents' marriage had been a love story, a perfect dream. But this journal, it was a nightmare. She read on, a growing sense of dread settling in her stomach. The entries told a story of a business deal gone wrong, a partnership with a man named Alistair Finch. The deal was supposed to save both of their businesses, but her parents, in a moment of desperation, had manipulated the legal documents and forced Finch out. They had taken everything, leaving him with nothing. Isabel's world tilted on its axis. The idyllic life she had lived, the perfect family she had cherished, was all a lie built on betrayal, on a dark, unspoken secret that had poisoned their family for years. And she was standing right in the middle of it. Isabel sat on the dusty floor of her mother's study, the journal open in her lap. The words swam before her eyes, but the message was a cold, clear slap to the face. The perfect love story, the idyllic life, the successful winery. It was all a house of cards built on a foundation of lies. Her parents, whom she had idolized, were not the artists and dreamers she had believed them to be. They were betrayers, thieves who had stolen from a friend. Alistair Finch. The name echoed in her mind. She had never heard of him. He was a ghost from a past her parents had meticulously erased. She closed the journal and ran her hand over its worn leather cover, a mix of grief and rage swirling inside her. The rage won out. She had to know everything. She began to search the study, rummaging through old papers and forgotten documents. The room was a treasure trove of family history, a history she now knew was filled with dark secrets. She found stacks of old invoices, business contracts, and legal documents. She sorted through them, her hands trembling. And then she found it, a file with Alistair Finch's name on it. Inside, there were letters, legal agreements, and a final terse note from her father to Finch, dated years ago. The letters revealed a partnership, a dream they had all shared, to create a unique wine, a masterpiece. But the partnership had soured. Her parents had a rare disease in their vines, and they had needed money to save their winery. Finch, a wealthy investor, had refused to lend them more money, believing their venture was doomed. In a fit of desperation, her parents had forged documents, selling off Finch's shares for a fraction of their value and forcing him out. The letters from Finch were a heartbreaking descent into despair, from pleading to rage to resignation. He had lost everything, his money, his business, his best friends, and his dream. Isabel felt sick. She closed the file, the truth a bitter taste in her mouth. She went outside, where Leo and Noah were still arguing, their voices a low, angry hum. They stopped when they saw her, her face pale and drawn. "What's wrong?" Noah asked, his voice filled with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," Isabel said, her voice a low, raspy voice. "Our parents, they weren't what we thought they were." She showed them the journal and the file. Leo took the file, his face a mask of disbelief. He read through the documents, his eyes scanning the legalese. He was a lawyer, and he could see the forgery, the manipulation, the cold, calculated betrayal. He looked at her, his face ashen. "This can't be real. This is insane." "It's real," Isabel said, her voice filled with a heartbreaking finality. "They cheated him. They stole his money. They took everything he had."
Noah, always the optimist, refused to believe it. "No, this is a misunderstanding. It's a mistake. Our parents would never do something like this. They were good people. They loved us." "Good people don't steal from their friends, Noah," Leo said, his voice hard and unforgiving. "They ruined a man's life." Just as the argument reached a fever pitch, another car pulled up the driveway. It was a sleek black sedan, a stark contrast to their dusty rental cars. A woman in a stylish dark dress stepped out. She was tall and elegant, with a quiet confidence that radiated from her. She looked at the three of them, a ghost of a smile on her face. Her eyes, a cold, piercing blue, seemed to see through them, to the ugly truth beneath their perfect facades. "Hello," she said, her voice a low, melodic purr. "I'm Ava Finch. I believe you're on my family's land." Isabel's heart stopped. She looked at the woman, her mind racing. Ava Finch, the name from the journal, the daughter of the man her parents had betrayed. She was here. She had come for them. Ava's smile widened, but her eyes remained cold. "My father, Alistair, was a partner in this vineyard, until your parents manipulated him out of it. They took everything from him. They destroyed his life. And now I've come to take it back." Leo, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward. "We don't know anything about this. This is a family dispute. We'll handle it." "It's not a dispute, Mr. Crawford," Ava said, her voice losing its melodic quality and becoming a cold, hard stone. "It's a debt, your parents' debt, and it's one you're going to pay." She held up a small, elegant phone and showed them a document. It was a legal document, a lawsuit filed against their parents' estate, charging them with fraud and emotional distress. "I've been working on this for years. I've gathered the evidence. I found every forged document, every manipulated contract. The law is on my side. You have two choices. You can fight me, and I will take everything from you. The vineyard, the house, your inheritance. I will ruin you. Or you can give me what I want. You can give me my father's share of the profits, and you can do it without a fight." Isabel looked at her, a fire of anger and a sense of responsibility burning in her eyes. "What do you want?" Ava said, her voice as sharp as glass. "I want justice. I want you to admit what your parents did. I want you to make it right. Or I will take everything you have." The three of them stood there, silent. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows on the hills. The ghost of their parents' betrayal was now standing right in front of them, a living, breathing testament to their sins. The idyllic life they had cherished was gone. The perfect family they had loved was a lie, and they were now standing in the wreckage of a past they knew nothing about.
The silence that followed Ava Finch's words was heavy and suffocating, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of traffic. The sun had fully set, painting the sky in strokes of deep purple and fading orange. In the gathering dusk, Ava looked less like a woman and more like a ghost from their past, a living, breathing testament to their parents' sins. Leo, always the first to act, broke the silence. "You've got the wrong people," he said, his voice hard and cold. "Our parents are gone. Whatever they did, it's over." Ava's cold smile didn't waver. "It's not over until the debt is paid, Mr. Crawford, and the debt is substantial. My father lost everything because of their treachery. His vineyard, his business, his reputation, everything." "You want money?" Leo asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "We don't have it. This place is in ruins. We're broke." Ava laughed, a low, humorless sound. "I don't want your money, Leo. My father had more money than he knew what to do with. What he wanted was justice. And what I want is for you to admit what your parents did, publicly." Isabel's heart hammered against her ribs. Admit what they did? That's insane. It would destroy their legacy. It would destroy everything they worked for. "That's the point," Ava said, her voice a chilling whisper. "My father's legacy was destroyed. My family was shamed. He spent the last years of his life in disgrace, and your parents' name was a curse in our house. Now it's your turn to feel what he felt." Noah, his face pale with a mix of fear and confusion, finally spoke. But they loved us. They were good people. They can't have been this cruel." "Good people don't steal from their friends, Noah," Ava said, her eyes fixed on him. "And they don't leave a man to drown in his own despair." She held up her phone again, and this time she showed them a picture of her father, a man with a kind, gentle face, but his eyes were filled with a deep, bottomless sadness. "This is what your parents did to him. They broke him." Isabel felt a wave of nausea wash over her. It was one thing to read the words in a journal, to see the cold, hard facts in a legal document, but it was another to see the face of the man they had destroyed. It was a face that would haunt her nightmares for years to come. "We have to do something," Isabel said, her voice filled with a desperate urgency. "We have to fix this." "How?" Leo asked, his voice a low growl. "You want to publicly humiliate our family? You want to admit our parents were liars and thieves? That's not justice. That's suicide." "It's the right thing to do," Isabel said, her voice a low, fierce whisper. "We have to right the wrongs of the past." "There's nothing to right," Leo said, his voice filled with a cold, unforgiving rage. "They're gone. And this woman, she's a predator. She's here to destroy us, and I won't let her." Ava watched them argue, a flicker of something that looked almost like amusement in her eyes. "My offer stands," she said, her voice a low purr. "You have 1 week. 1 week to decide what's more important to you, your parents' memory or your own future. If you don't agree to my terms, the lawsuit proceeds, and I promise you, I will take everything." She got back into her car without another word and drove away, a black shadow disappearing into the night. The three of them stood there in silence, the weight of their parents' legacy pressing down on them. The stars began to appear in the sky, a silent, indifferent witness to the storm brewing in their hearts. The next few days were a blur of chaos and conflict. They couldn't agree on a single thing. Leo was on the phone constantly, trying to find a loophole in the lawsuit, a legal angle he could exploit. He was a lawyer, and he saw the world as a series of battles to be won. He refused to give in, to admit defeat. Isabel, on the other hand, was tormented by guilt. She spent her days poring over the journal, trying to understand her mother's actions, trying to find some sign of a good heart, of a person who had made a terrible mistake. She saw their parents' perfect life as a lie, a betrayal of everything they had ever taught them. Noah was lost. He spent his time walking through the vineyard, his mind a chaotic mess of thoughts. He felt torn between his siblings, between his loyalty to his family and his desire to do the right thing. He didn't know what to believe. He didn't know who to trust. The tension between them was palpable. They argued over everything. The best way to handle the lawsuit, the best way to get rid of the debt, the best way to save the vineyard. Their bond, once a source of strength, was now a source of conflict. One night, as the sun was setting, they met on the porch swing. It was the place where their family used to sit and talk, where their parents would tell them stories about their lives. It was the only place where they felt a sense of peace. "We have to decide," Isabel said, her voice a soft, desperate whisper. "We can't keep doing this. We're a family." "We're not a family, Isabel," Leo said, his voice cold and unforgiving. "We're 3 strangers who were brought together by a lie. Our parents lied to us. They used us. They ruined us." "That's not true," Noah said, his voice filled with a deep, quiet sadness. "They loved us. They made a terrible mistake.
We can't let that mistake destroy us." Isabel looked at them, her heart aching with a deep, unbearable pain. They were so different. They were so far apart. How could they ever find a way to be a family again? "What if there's another way?" she said, her voice a desperate plea. "What if we don't have to choose between our parents' legacy and our own future? What if we can have both?" They looked at her, their eyes filled with a flicker of hope. But the hope was quickly extinguished by the cold, hard reality of their situation. The legal documents, the debt, the lawsuit, it was all too much. "There's no other way," Leo said, his voice filled with a crushing finality. "There's only one way out of this mess, and it's not a pretty one." The week that followed Ava Finch's visit was a waking nightmare. The vineyard, once a place of quiet memories, was now a battleground. The house, which had been a safe haven, was now a cage, trapping them with their guilt and their resentment. The three siblings, who had once been united by their shared past, were now separated by a terrible, unspoken secret.
Leo, a pragmatist at his core, spent his days on the phone, his voice a low, insistent hum as he spoke to lawyers and business associates. He refused to accept Ava's terms. He saw it not as a moral dilemma, but as a legal problem to be solved. "We'll find a loophole," he said to Isabel one morning, his voice filled with a cold, desperate certainty. "We'll prove her wrong. Our parents were shrewd, but they weren't stupid. There has to be something." But Isabel was not interested in loopholes. She was tormented by the guilt, by the cold reality that their perfect family had been built on a foundation of betrayal. She spent her days in their parents' study, poring over old ledgers, trying to understand how her mother could have lived with such a lie. She saw the guilt in the hurried lines of her mother's handwriting, the sadness in the faded photos. She felt a profound and terrible sense of responsibility, as if their parents' debt had been transferred to her. "We can't just find a way out of it, Leo," she said, her voice filled with a quiet despair. "We have to own it. We have to do the right thing. Our parents made a terrible mistake. We have to make it right." "And what is the right thing, Isabel?" Leo retorted, his voice filled with a cold, cutting sarcasm. "Publicly humiliating our family? Destroying their legacy? Giving that witch everything she wants? That's not justice. That's self-destruction." "It's about honor," Isabel said, her voice trembling. "It's about our honor. Do you want to be a part of a family that steals from its friends? Do you want to live with a lie?" "I don't care about honor," Leo shot back, his face a mask of cold fury. "I care about survival. My parents gave us this vineyard, this legacy. They gave us a chance to have a life, and I will not let some vengeful woman take that away from us." Noah, the youngest and most idealistic of the three, was caught in the middle. He spent his days in the vineyard, wandering through the rows of grapevines, trying to find a way to make everyone happy. He had always been the peacemaker, the one who tried to find the good in everyone. But now he was faced with a truth that was too ugly to be contained. He couldn't choose between his siblings, between his loyalty to his family, and his desire to do the right thing. He approached Isabel one evening, his face filled with a deep, quiet sadness. "Isabel, what if there's another way? What if we can find something, some sort of proof that our parents didn't do it? What if we can prove that they were innocent?" Isabel shook her head. "There is no innocence, Noah. It's all in the journal. It's all in the legal documents. They did it. We have to face it." But what about our family?" Noah asked, his voice filled with a desperate plea. "What about us?" "There is no us, Noah," Leo said, his voice cold and unforgiving. He had overheard their conversation. "Not anymore. We are three separate people, fighting for three separate things. Isabel wants to redeem our parents' name. I want to save our legacy. And you You're still trying to live in a fantasy world where our family was perfect. There is no us. There is only this." He gestured to the dusty, decaying house, to the overgrown vineyard, to the cold, unforgiving legal documents. The three of them stood there, silent and alone, separated by a wall of unspoken words. Their bond, once a source of strength, was now a source of conflict. The perfect family they had cherished was gone. The idyllic life they had lived was a lie. And they were now standing in the wreckage of a past they knew nothing about. The tension between them was palpable. They argued over everything: the best way to handle the lawsuit, the best way to get rid of the debt, the best way to save the vineyard. Their bond, once a source of strength, was now a source of conflict. Leo decided to take matters into his own hands. He secretly contacted a realtor, a man with a reputation for selling difficult properties. He set up a meeting, a clandestine affair, in a small cafe in a nearby town. "The vineyard is a liability," he told the realtor, his voice low and secretive. "I need you to find a buyer, someone who will pay cash, someone who won't ask too many questions." The realtor, a man who saw only dollar signs, agreed. Meanwhile, Isabel, in a fit of desperate passion, began to work on the vineyard. She spent her days in the fields, pulling weeds, pruning the vines, and nurturing the dormant plants. She was driven by a single-minded purpose: to make the vineyard whole again. She was determined to prove that their family could be redeemed, that their parents' legacy could be rebuilt. She saw the vineyard not as a business, but as a living, breathing testament to their parents' potential.
Noah, feeling lost and useless, retreated into his art. He set up a small studio in a dusty corner of the old barn. He began to paint, his brush strokes a chaotic mess of colors that reflected the turmoil in his heart. He painted the vineyard, the house, his siblings, but his paintings were not of a beautiful, idyllic past. They were of a broken, fragmented present. He painted his family not as they were, but as they were meant to be. He painted a family that was united, a family that was whole. The three of them lived in the same house, but they were worlds apart. They ate their meals in silence, their eyes fixed on their plates, a silent cold war raging between them. The house, which had once been filled with laughter and love, was now a tomb, a silent witness to their broken family. The perfect family portrait had been shattered, and the pieces were too small to be put back together. The quiet tension that had settled over the vineyard finally snapped. The siblings, unable to talk to each other, went their separate ways, each trying to find a solution on their own. Leo, the pragmatic lawyer, was on the phone, trying to find legal loopholes. Isabel, the romantic, was in the vineyard, trying to fix the damage with her own two hands. Noah, the artist, was lost in his own world, painting his pain and confusion. But their separate paths led them back to the same place, their parents' study. The room was a museum of their past, filled with old photos, dusty books, and forgotten memories. It was a place of comfort, but now it felt like a prison. They were trapped by a legacy they hadn't chosen, a lie they had no part in creating. One evening, they all found themselves there, drawn by an unspoken need to understand. They didn't speak, but their presence was a silent acknowledgement of their shared purpose. Isabel was looking through a stack of old business ledgers, her fingers tracing the hurried lines of her mother's handwriting. Leo was going through old legal documents, his face a mask of concentration as he searched for a loophole. Noah was sitting in a corner sketching in a notebook, his hands a blur of motion. Isabel looked up from the ledger, her eyes wide with a sudden realization. "Look at this," she said, her voice a hushed whisper. "This is a transfer of funds. It's marked as a loan to a friend, but there's a different entry in another ledger. It's marked as a repayment of a debt."
Leo's head shot up. He walked over and looked at the ledger, his eyes scanning the entries. "This is it," he said, his voice filled with a cold, desperate certainty. "This is the proof. Our parents didn't just swindle Finch. They deliberately manipulated the books. They wanted to make it look like a friendly transaction. They were planning this from the start." Noah looked up from his notebook, his face pale. "But why?" he asked, his voice filled with a profound sense of despair. "Why would they do this? They were so good to us. They loved us. Why would they do something so horrible?" Isabel's heart ached with a deep, unbearable pain. "I don't know, Noah. But there's more. Look at this." She showed them another entry, a note from her mother to her father. It was a short, terse note, but the words were a dagger to the heart. "He's not giving up. We have to do something. We can't let him take the vineyard. Not now." Leo's face was a mask of cold fury. "They were desperate," he said, his voice a low growl. "They were trying to save their vineyard. But they didn't just do it to save their dream. They did it to save us. They were afraid that if they lost the vineyard, they would lose everything. And they were right." Isabel felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Their parents hadn't just been trying to save their business. They had been trying to save their family. They had been trying to build a future for their children, a future that was built on a foundation of lies and betrayal. They continued to search, their hands a blur of motion as they went through more documents. They found more evidence, more lies, more betrayals. They found an old blueprint of the vineyard, with a section marked with a large X. They found a photograph of their father and Finch, their arms around each other, a look of pure joy on their faces. It was a photograph that was taken before the betrayal, before the darkness had entered their lives. They found a letter from their father to their mother, written on a torn-out page from the journal. "I'm sorry, my love. I know this is a mistake. I know this is a sin. But I have to do it. I have to save our family. I have to save our children. Forgive me."
Isabel's heart ached with a deep, unbearable pain. Her parents hadn't been monsters. They had been human. They had made a terrible, unforgivable mistake, but they had done it out of love. They had done it to save them. "We have to stop this," Isabel said, her voice a low, desperate whisper. "We can't let this happen. We can't let Ava take everything from us." "We can't just give up," Leo said, his voice filled with a newfound determination. "We can fight this. We have the proof. We have the evidence." "What if there's another way?" Noah said, his voice a soft, desperate whisper. "What if we don't have to fight? What if we can find a way to make it right, to give Ava what she wants, without destroying our family?" Isabel looked at him, her eyes wide with a flicker of hope. "What do you mean?" "What if we use our unique skills to solve this problem?" Noah said. "Leo is a lawyer. Isabel is a sommelier. I'm an artist. We can use our talents to save our family." Leo looked at him, a skeptical expression on his face. "What are you talking about, Noah? We can find a way to make this vineyard profitable again. We can make so much money that we can pay off the debt, pay off Ava, and save our family. We can do it together." Isabel's heart leapt. It was an impossible idea. It was a fantasy, but it was the only hope they had. They were a family, and they had a chance to become a family again. They had a chance to fix their parents' mistakes. The brief flicker of hope, sparked by Noah's words, was quickly extinguished by the cold, harsh reality of their situation. The three siblings retreated to their separate corners, each of them pursuing their own desperate strategy to save the vineyard and their family's name. They lived in the same house, ate at the same table, but their worlds were oceans apart. The silence that had once been a shared grief was now a suffocating weight of suspicion and resentment.
Leo, driven by a fierce desire to protect what was left of his family's legacy, took matters into his own hands. He secretly contacted a well-known real estate broker, a man with a reputation for selling difficult properties and asking no questions. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe in a nearby town, away from prying eyes. "The vineyard is a liability," Leo said, his voice low and secretive. "I need you to find a buyer, someone with deep pockets who won't ask too many questions, someone who will pay cash, a quick, clean transaction." The broker, a slick man named Harrison, smiled, his eyes glinting with professional greed. "Everything has a price, Mr. Hayes. Your family's reputation, this vineyard, it can all be sold. But we have to move quickly. That girl, Finch, she's not going to wait forever." Leo nodded, his jaw set in a hard line. He didn't care about the money. He cared about survival. He would sell the vineyard, betray his sister's romantic ideals, and shatter his brother's dreams, but he would save his family from public shame. He believed that was the only way to win. While Leo was making his secret deals, Isabel was fighting her own battle. She was driven by an obsessive, almost spiritual need to redeem their parents' name. She spent her days in the vineyard, her hands raw from pruning and her back aching from weeding. She was no longer just a sommelier. She was a gardener, a farmer, a woman fighting for the soul of her family. She nurtured the dormant vines, talking to them, telling them about their history, about their potential. She discovered a small, forgotten section of the vineyard, hidden behind a grove of old oak trees. The vines there were old, gnarled, and almost completely overgrown. They were a lost cause, a testament to her parents' neglect. But as she cleaned them, she noticed something extraordinary. The grapes were a unique, deep purple, unlike any she had ever seen. A native variety, she realized, one that had been lost to time. This discovery was a revelation, a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness. She knew that a unique, native variety could be a game changer. It could produce a wine so rare and so valuable that it could save the vineyard. But it was an old vine, and it would need years of care before it was ready. She would have to work harder than ever, and she would have to convince her siblings to join her. Noah, meanwhile, feeling lost and powerless, was trying to find a way to help. He felt responsible for the chaos, for the way his siblings had turned against each other. He believed that if he could just talk to Ava, if he could just appeal to her sense of justice, he could make her see reason. He sent her an email, a long, heartfelt plea for a truce. He explained their pain, their guilt, their desperate desire to do the right thing. He offered her a small token payment as a gesture of goodwill, a sign of their commitment to atone for their parents' sins. He thought he was being a peacemaker, a mediator. He thought he was building a bridge. He was a fool. Ava's response was swift and merciless. She forwarded his email to her lawyers, who immediately used it against the Hayes siblings. The email, with its token payment and desperate desire to do the right thing, was a formal admission of guilt. It was exactly what she needed to strengthen her case. The legal documents arrived the next morning. They were a terrifying sight, filled with legal jargon and cold, unforgiving language. The words admission of guilt, fraud, and breach of contract stood out like daggers. They had been trapped. They had been outmaneuvered. Leo, his face a mask of cold fury, threw the documents on the kitchen table. "What did you do, Noah?" he said, his voice a low, terrifying growl. "What in God's name did you do?" Noah's face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. "I was trying to help. I was trying to talk to her. I was trying to make her see that we're not like them." "You are an idiot, Noah," Leo said, his voice filled with a cold, cutting sarcasm. "You just handed her the key to our entire family's legacy. You just gave her everything she wanted." Isabel, her heart a leaden weight in her chest, looked at them, her face a mask of quiet despair. The fragile hope she had felt just a few days ago was gone. The family was shattered. And it was all her fault. The three of them stood there, alone in the wreckage of their parents' sins. They were no longer a family.
They were three separate people, fighting a war they couldn't win, trapped in a house that was now a prison. The perfect family portrait had been shattered, and the pieces were too small to be put back together. The silence that followed Noah's disastrous attempt at peacemaking was more painful than any argument. The house was a museum of their parents' lies, and now it was a monument to their own failure. Leo retreated to his study, lost in the cold comfort of legal documents. Noah locked himself in his room, painting his guilt and despair onto canvases. Isabel, her heart a leaden weight in her chest, found her own sanctuary in the vineyard. The sun beat down on her back, a relentless weight. She worked with a quiet, desperate fury, her hands raw from pruning and her back aching from weeding. She was no longer just a sommelier, she was a woman fighting for the soul of her family. She talked to the vines, telling them about their history, their potential, their forgotten legacy. She nurtured the dormant grapes, believing that the land would be a source of solace and maybe salvation. Her work led her to a small, forgotten section of the vineyard, hidden behind a grove of old oak trees. The vines there were old, gnarled, and almost completely overgrown. They were a lost cause, a testament to her parents' neglect. But as she cleaned them, she noticed something extraordinary. The grapes were a unique deep purple, unlike any she had ever seen. A native variety, she realized, one that had been lost to time. Her parents had hidden them here, hoping to keep them a secret. This discovery was a revelation, a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness. She knew that a unique native variety could be a game changer. It could produce a wine so rare and so valuable that it could save the vineyard. But it was an old vine, and it would need years of care before it was ready. She would have to work harder than ever, and she would have to convince her siblings to join her.
Isabel returned to the house, her heart pounding with a newfound energy. She found Leo in his study, surrounded by a sea of legal papers. "Leo," she said, her voice filled with a quiet, desperate hope, "I found something. Something that can save us." Leo looked up from his papers, his face a mask of cold cynicism. "What is it, Isabel? Another of your romantic fantasies?" "No," she said, her voice a determined whisper. "It's the truth, our parents' dirty little secret. They weren't just trying to swindle Finch. They were trying to save something they hid from everyone." She took him to the back of the vineyard, to the gnarled, forgotten vines. "This," she said, her voice filled with a quiet, almost spiritual reverence, "this is a native variety. It's a miracle. We can make a unique wine, a wine so rare that it can bring us a fortune." Leo looked at her, his face filled with a flicker of disbelief. "A native variety, after all these years? We can't just plant a few vines and expect a miracle." "No," she said, her voice filled with a quiet, desperate certainty. "But we can work together. We can use our knowledge to save our family. You can handle the legal side, I can handle the winemaking. Noah he can help us find a way to market it. We can do this. We can fight this." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and a flicker of hope. "It's a long shot, Isabel, and we're running out of time." "We're not running out of time," she said, her voice a fierce, determined growl. "We're running out of hope, and I won't let us lose it." They stood there, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in a blaze of orange and purple. The vineyard was no longer a symbol of their parents' betrayal. It was a testament to their own resilience, a promise of a new beginning. They had a long way to go. For the first time in a long time, they were a team. The brief flicker of hope sparked by Isabel's discovery was quickly extinguished by the cold, harsh reality of their situation. The three siblings were a team, but they were also broke,
and a ticking clock was counting down to their public humiliation. They had a long way to go, and their hope was a fragile thing, a single flame in a suffocating darkness. Just as they were beginning to plan their next move, Ava's lawyers struck. The legal documents arrived the next morning, a terrifying sight, filled with legal jargon and cold, unforgiving language. The words admission of guilt, fraud, and breach of contract stood out like daggers. They had been trapped. They had been outmaneuvered.
Ava's lawyer, a slick, merciless man named Mr. Thompson, arrived at the vineyard a few days later, a cold smile on his face. He held a document in his hand, a final offer from Ava. "This is a formal offer of settlement," he said, his voice a low purr. "Miss Finch is willing to drop the lawsuit, but on one condition. You will sign this document, and you will publicly admit what your parents did. And in return, you will be free of this debt, and we will leave you and your vineyard in peace." The document was a public confession, a declaration of their parents' guilt. It was an admission of guilt, a public shaming. It was a choice between their family's legacy and their own future. Leo's hand trembled as he reached for the pen. "I won't do it," he said, his voice a low growl. "I won't betray my parents." Isabel's heart ached with a deep, unbearable pain. "We have to do it, Leo. We have to do the right thing." Noah, his face pale with a mixture of fear and confusion, looked at them, his eyes filled with a deep, quiet sadness. "There is no right thing. There's just us and our choice." Mr. Thompson looked at them, his eyes filled with a cold, professional impatience. "This is your last chance. Your time is running out. Your choice is simple: public humiliation or complete financial ruin." As they were about to sign the document, Isabel noticed something in the paper. It was a small, almost imperceptible detail. She saw it, a small, legal loophole that could be used against them. It was a single, small error, a tiny flaw in the document that could give them a chance to fight back. She looked at her siblings, her eyes filled with a newfound energy. "Don't sign it," she said, her voice a fierce, determined whisper. "I've found a way out. They made a mistake. We can fight this." Leo looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and a flicker of hope. "What are you talking about, Isabel? What mistake?" "They used a legal term that doesn't apply to a family-owned business. It's a loophole. It gives us a chance to fight back. We can use it to stall for time, to find a way to pay off the debt." Leo's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're a genius, Isabel." Mr. Thompson, seeing the sudden change in their demeanor, his face a mask of cold fury. "This is a bluff. You can't fight this. You have nothing." "We have more than you think," Isabel said, her voice filled with a quiet, fierce resolve. "We have our hope, and we have our family, and we're not going to let you take that away from us."
Mr. Thompson, defeated, left the vineyard. His head held high, but his face a mask of cold, unforgiving rage. He knew that they were right. They had a chance to fight back, a chance to win. He would be back, and he would be more ruthless than ever. The three siblings stood there, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, they were a team. They had a choice to make. They could either run or they could fight, and they chose to fight. The silence that followed Mr. Thompson's departure was filled with a new, quiet energy. The three siblings were a team, but they were also broke, and a ticking clock was counting down to their public humiliation. They had a long way to go, and their hope was a fragile thing, a single flame in a suffocating darkness. They worked with a desperate, frantic energy, their days and nights a blur of hard work and quiet determination.
They pruned the vines, their hands raw and blistered, their backs aching from the relentless labor. They harvested the grapes, their faces and hands stained with the juice of the rare native grapes. They were no longer just siblings. They were a team of farmers, of winemakers, of people fighting for their lives. They discovered that the rare grapes had an extraordinary taste. It was an earthy, almost wild taste, a flavor that spoke of the land, of the sun, of the history of the vineyard. Isabel, with a newfound sense of purpose, spent her days in the cellar, her hands stained with the deep purple of the grapes, her mind filled with a single, desperate hope. She was a master sommelier, and she knew that this wine, this unique wild wine, could save them. Meanwhile, Leo, with a fierce, cold determination, worked on the legal side of their plan. He spent his days in the library, his face buried in legal documents, his mind filled with a single desperate need to win. He found a legal precedent, a case from a century ago that could be used as a loophole. It was a long shot, a gamble, but it was their only chance. Noah, meanwhile, feeling a new, quiet strength, worked on a plan to market their wine. He had always been the idealist, the one who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. He created a small, heartfelt video about their family story, about their parents' mistakes, about their own journey to redemption. It was a simple video, a human story, a story of hope and forgiveness. The three of them worked with a quiet, desperate harmony, their conversations a simple exchange of facts and ideas. They were no longer fighting. They were a team, united by a single purpose. They had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, they were not alone.
The day of the hearing arrived, a cold, gray day that matched the mood in the courtroom. Mr. Thompson was there, a cold smile on his face, his eyes filled with professional contempt. Ava was there too, her face a mask of cold, unforgiving rage. Isabel, Leo, and Noah walked into the courtroom, their heads held high, their hearts a drumbeat of fear and resolve. They had a long way to go, and they were ready to fight. The courtroom was a sterile, unforgiving space, its polished wood and cold marble reflecting the tension in the room. Mr. Thompson stood tall and confident, a predator in a suit, his voice a drone of legal terms and cold accusations. He laid out their parents' fraudulent actions in merciless detail, painting a picture of calculated greed and deception. Ava sat beside him, her face a mask of cold fury, her eyes fixed on the Hayes siblings like a hawk's. She was not there for the money. She was there for justice, and she was going to get it. When it was their turn, Leo rose from his chair, his hands clasped behind his back. He had a look of quiet resolve, a man ready for a war he never wanted. He began to speak, his voice a low, steady rumble that cut through the silence. "Your Honor, we are not here to deny the mistakes of our parents. We are here to admit them. Our parents betrayed the trust of a partner, and for that, we accept responsibility. But we are here to offer a path to restitution that does not involve public humiliation or the destruction of a family legacy." Mr. Thompson let out a small, contemptuous chuckle. "Your Honor, my client has been waiting for years. This is not a matter of a few dollars. It is a matter of justice." "And justice is what we are offering," Isabel said, rising from her chair. She carried a small, elegantly labeled bottle in her hands. "This is a bottle of the Phoenix, a small batch wine from a rare, native grape variety we discovered on our vineyard. This wine is more than a product. It is a symbol of our work, our reconciliation, and our dedication to making things right. We are not offering a lawsuit. We are offering a partnership." She placed the bottle on the table in front of Ava. "We know what our parents did was wrong, Ava, and we want to make it right. We can't give you the past, but we can give you a share of the future. We want to work with you.
We want to share the profits from our wine, enough to repay every cent our parents took from yours. This is not about winning or losing. It's about healing." Ava looked at the bottle, a flicker of emotion in her eyes. It was a beautiful, elegant thing, and the label was simple but sincere. She could see the hand-drawn bird rising from the ashes, and she could see her name on it. It was a gesture of peace, a peace she never thought was possible. Leo stepped forward, his eyes filled with a quiet, fierce determination. He said, "Our parents had their reasons for their actions," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. "They were trying to save their vineyard, their legacy. They made a terrible mistake, but we are not them. We are their children, and we have a choice to make. We can either live in the shadows of their lies, or we can choose to walk in the light of the truth."
Noah, with a newfound sense of purpose, put his laptop on the table. He hit a button, and the video he had made began to play on a screen. It was a simple video, a heartfelt story of a family broken, a vineyard overgrown, and a journey to redemption. It showed them working together, their hands raw, their faces stained with dirt and grape juice. It showed their quiet moments of reconciliation, their arguments, and their tears. It was a story of hope, forgiveness, and a family that had found a way to work together. Ava watched the video, her eyes filled with tears. She had come to the courtroom for justice, for revenge, but what she saw was something else entirely. She saw a family that had been hurt by the same people who had hurt her. She saw a family that had chosen to heal, and a family that was offering her a chance to do the same. The courtroom was silent, a sacred space. The judge, a stoic, no-nonsense man, looked at them, his face a mask of respect. He had seen 1,000 cases like this, cases filled with hatred and revenge. But he had never seen anything like this. This was not a legal battle. It was a human story. He looked at Ava. "Miss Finch, do you accept their offer?" Ava looked at the bottle on the table, a silent acknowledgement between them. The feud was over. The battle was over. The journey was just beginning. She had what she wanted, but she had also found something she never knew she needed: peace. Friends, thank you for watching the story. Subscribe to the channel, and I'm also interested, where are you watching me from? Write in the comments. Until we meet again, dear friends.